Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Kocharhook. This evening, we're going to be talking about getting your sons and daughters to college. Things have changed a lot since I went to school back in the early 30s, and I've put two children through school, and they were in there in the early 2000s. But a lot has changed even in the last few weeks when you talk about the economics of things and where the money is available to be able to help fund someone who's just going to school, etc. And the cost of going to college has skyrocketed in the last 15, 20 years. So this evening we're going to be speaking with Dan Evertsz, and Dan is with College Planning Specialist of the Bay Area.
That's correct.
And he's going to give us some insight into what's going on these days, what it is that people have to be thinking about, and when you really should start thinking about planning. So Dan, thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate you coming all the way down here to be on Reference Point.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk a little bit about colleges and schools and things like that. I saw an interesting statistic I told you about earlier today that, and this is a stat from 2004, something like 3,053,536 students graduated from high school in 2004, and about 1.7 million of those, something like 55% of those kids, went on to college. And there's some other numbers that are just staggering as to the number of people that are in universities these days.
Yeah, well, Dave, what's happening is that number that you're talking about has increased as far as the amount of students that are out there. They're going to be attending college, and the problem is they're not building a lot of new colleges, and it's very competitive. It's super competitive. Just because you have a 4.0 doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get into the college of your choice.
Yeah, that was a lot different when I was going to college. But let's talk about this thing. How many colleges are there in the U.S. right now?
There are over 3,000 colleges.
About 3,000 colleges.
Yeah.
And there's some 17 million, I think was the number that I saw, students all told in our university system. But you were talking about how much more difficult it is to get in. And I think, what are the contributing factors to it being so much more challenging for a student to get into college these days?
Well, these days, because it's so competitive, it's not just about, again, like your grade point average. Some kids think if they take certain courses and they avoid, say, your AP classes, colleges are going to take that into consideration, whether that kid took an AP class, whether he didn't. Now, not so much the state schools, but more the private colleges. They look at a whole rounded situation of a student, and they want to see the student that is competitive, that even if he gets a B in the AP class, that may count more than the student that gets an A in an honors class. So the well-roundedness of a student is super important, because like I said, it's not just about your grades. It's are you trying to do the best, and also things like community service.
Community service?
Community service, that's what colleges look for these days. The bar for community service is 200 hours.
200 hours.
200 hours.
You expect a high school student to have put in 200 hours of some type of community service as an adjunct to the fact that they've got good grades and maybe we're in sports and stuff like that.
That's correct, because the colleges are looking for the well-rounded student.
Okay.
What have you done? What have you done to help your community? I mean, they say that somewhere around 30% of your whole not graduation, but 30% of your attempt to get into college is based upon your community service.
Really?
Yes.
Fascinating. Now, I understand that what you do a lot of workshops and seminars to inform people about this sort of thing, and you have a business that's associated with helping people through that. But the fact of the matter is that there is a lot of information that people need to know. So when a lot of folks come to your workshops, are they aware of some of these things we're talking about in terms of community service and stuff like that, and planning for their students to get to school and stuff?
To be brutally honest with you, 95% of the people in the room not only have a clue of what we're talking about, or the preparation and what's needed. I usually start off my workshops with, who's ever heard of a college planner before? I may have one arm go up, and it's surprising to me, because college planners are very similar to CPAs and financial planners. The only difference is we concentrate on the rules and regulations set forth by the Department of Education. Just like when you go to a CPA, he understands the IRS tax laws. We understand the college laws, the laws that will help you get your kid into college.
Now, in high schools, though, don't they have, what do they call them, guidance counselors? Aren't the guidance counselors supposed to sort of play that role for a student? I think when I was going to high school and thinking about going to college, I really started to think about it in my junior year of high school.
Yeah.
And you're smiling.
No, thank God for the guidance counselors, because in the state of California, the guidance counselor ratio is one guidance counselor per every 966 students.
966 to 1?
966 to 1.
Whoa.
In the state of California.
California, okay.
So, I mean, as you can imagine, it's tough. I mean, how can a guidance counselor really help, and answer all the questions for, that amount of kids? It's almost impossible. So, and thank God for guidance counselors, because a lot of them do a great job and they work very hard. But what we try to do is sort of enhance what they do. Okay, people come to our workshops and we give them answers to questions that the guidance counselors may not be familiar with, such as how to pay for college, financial aid. College guidance counselors are great at helping you with the applications and maybe picking a few schools. But they don't really talk much about how to get financial aid. And we go from career counseling to admissions to financial aid to picking the right school, because you may have a situation where you have a really good student, you make $100,000 a year, and you pick a school that doesn't have any financial aid available.
So how do you, this is an interesting thing that you're talking about right here. There's a whole body of knowledge. It's not just as easy as saying, Dad, I want to go to college, is what you're telling me.
That's correct.
The student has to have decent grades. He has to be doing some other things. But let's talk a little bit about this realm of how do you identify a place where you might be able to go to school? I mean, aren't there just a set, some number of really premier schools that everybody would want to go to? Does that mean that they're the best ones in that discipline, or how does that all play out?
Well, there's what we call your reach schools, which are the schools that maybe in Ivy League schools, the schools that you might want to go to, Stanford, for an example. But it's really competitive to get in those schools. Like Stanford, for example, had over 26,000 applicants last year for 2,450 spots. 26,000
applicants for 2,450 spots?
That's correct. So what we try to do in our business is that we actually we'll take a look at the student's GPA, the parent's financial situation, and we also they'll have their list of schools, and generally what will happen is we'll have our list of schools, and we try to blend them in, because generally our list of schools are schools that are looking for kids from Northern California, first of all, okay, but also these schools that we know that have the large endowments. They have tons of financial aid available, and some schools give out more financial aid than others. And we try to keep it around. We have the reach schools, and then the schools you have a good percentage of getting into based on your grades. Then again, you have to look at what is your major. What are you majoring in? I mean, if you sometimes we look at kids' list, and they want to be say a engineer. And then, we go into our software program and look it up, and they don't even offer an engineering at the school he wants to go to. So
that kind of stuff happens?
That kind of stuff happens all the time.
So when is it that you should start thinking about this sort of stuff? As I said, I started thinking about where I was going to go to college when I was a junior in high school.
Right.
You can't do that anymore, can you?
No. To be brutally honest,
yeah,
you should start thinking the day your kid is born.
Okay.
I'm serious. Because the statistics show, I mean, when your kid is born, statistics show that by the time they become a senior in high school, 95% of parents in the United States have $10,000 or less saved for their kid's college education. But the other 5%, I've had parents walk in to my office that, they were telling me about the kid was 10 years old, they had like $80,000-$90,000 put away. Yeah, but that's rare.
Yeah.
And most people want to figure out how to get financial aid is a main concern with a lot of parents. And, we just try to give them a lot of guidelines on how to get to financial aid.
So there sounds like there's a couple of things that are, you have to plan, you have to start executing on almost from the get-go, this idea of thinking ahead. If you're having a family, if you want your kids to go to college, you should start planning for that and preparing for the financial impact of that right from the beginning. But as there's another timeline too, it sounds like, with respect to the student, when the student needs to start actually thinking about where he or she wants to go and what they should be doing in order to enhance their chances to get there. And when should a student start doing those sorts of things?
I would say about the ninth grade.
About the ninth grade?
About the ninth grade. You should really start thinking about that. The problem is, as you know, most ninth graders are not thinking about, what they're going to do for college. And a lot of that has to do with the parents. The parents need to be involved. They have to start thinking about what they're going to do. How are we going to plan? How are we going to pay for this? And unfortunately, a lot of parents don't. Now, what we suggest is sit down with the kid, have a meeting, meet with somebody, talk with someone other than just your guidance counselor, because it is so expensive now. The cost of attendance and when I say cost of attendance, I'm referring to not just the tuition. It's tuition plus the books plus living expenses plus walk around money.
Sure.
In California, the state system, it's around $18,000 for cost of attendance.
Per year?
Per year, okay. For the UCs,
wow.
It's around $25,000 for the UCs, University of California system. Now, when you talk about the private colleges, you're talking generally between $40,000 and $50,000.
Wow.
So if you aren't planning and you wait till your senior year and you're trying to figure this stuff out,
you're in
you're in a little trouble.
$40,000-$50,000. I went to a private university in the state of Washington, and I was paying, but this is over 30 years ago, I was paying like $2,500 a year or something ridiculous like that. I mean, it was ridiculously cheap.
I think that's cheap. I won't tell you what I paid for tuition when I was in college.
Let's talk about finding funds right now, because we're going through some interesting economic challenges right now. And one of the things that I remember you were telling me about when we met a couple weeks ago was that there were a lot of funds made available as either what would you call them, grants or special programs from financial institutions like Wells Fargo and Washington Mutual and some of these other financial institutions. But there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the banking world right now. What is this doing to the availability of funds?
It's shrinking the amount of money that's available for a student loan, and it's affecting a lot of my clients. I try to keep them away from student loans. It's the last thing that we want them to do. But if they have to go that route, I think we had 135 lenders less than a month ago that would actually give a plus loan, which is a parent loan for undergraduate students, and that has shrunk to less than 22.
Say that again. There were
135 30 days ago, and that's shrunk to less than 22. And the 22 number was a week ago. I have a feeling that's more around 15 right now.
And these are financial institutions that were offering some type of student loan?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
And now if the cost of going to college is in the the 5 digits like we were talking about, and finding funds is the availability of resources for funding are going away, how does a student manage? How do you pay for college?
It's all planning. It's all planning. There is a considerable amount of money out there if you apply at the right college.
If you apply at the right college.
See, the problem, what happens with families now is that, I'm going to talk about the cost of a private education as opposed to a public education.
Okay.
Yeah, what a lot of families will do is they will go onto a website of say, University of San Francisco, and I think it's around $45,000. And if you make $100,000 and college is going to cost you $45,000, what are you generally going to do? You're going to click to the website of the college that costs, $15,000, $18,000. That's a big mistake. And the reason for that is that the private institutions have more funding for financial aid than the public does.
Really?
That's correct.
Why is that?
Endowments, your alumni, they're generally in much better financial shape, and they're looking for good students. They will give good students a good financial aid package. Now, the key to that is knowing which ones give the best financial aid package.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a software program that, once we narrow down the list of schools, our software program will give you the amount of aid that this school traditionally gives out. To give you a little better idea, there's something called expected family contribution, and that's something that all your viewers need to know about. What the government does is approximately for every $100,000 that you make, between 23 and 25% of that, the government expects you to come out of your pocket with. So you figure in the middle, say we take 24, if you make 100 grand between a working family, that is $24,000 that they expect you to pay for.
Expect you to pay
out of your pocket.
For college.
For college. Now, if that number is, if you're at a state school.
Is that in a year? Is that
that's for
a 4-year term?
1 year.
For 1 year?
1 year.
If you're making $100,000 in income as a family, they're expecting, if you're sending a child to college, that you're going to be able to put 24,000 of that 100 toward that student's education?
That's correct.
Whoa.
Well, so if you take a state school, we're talking about that, say $18,000, and your cost of your expected family contribution is $24,000. You're not getting any financial aid from the school.
Yeah, I guess not.
You're not going to get a dime. The good news and the solution to that is there are a lot of strategies out there that the public is not aware of to lower that expected family contribution number. And as a college planner, that's what we do for a living. Okay, we look at solutions and strategies to figure out ways to lower that number to help a family become eligible for financial aid, just like when your CPA does your taxes. He's looking for a loophole to get you more money back at the end of the year. Well, there are a lot of, matter of fact, there's over 3,000 strategies to lower that number.
Really?
The public doesn't know very much about it. They
just
don't know about it.
I'm going to want to let the folks out there know that they can send an email to info@referencepointtv.com, and we can get some queries and information over to Dan if you have any interest in learning about this sort of stuff, because this is important and necessary information. I mean, the idea that depending upon your income, the government is anticipating that you're going to contribute a certain percentage. That's a pretty hefty percentage of one's income to be putting toward a college education. What happens if you've got 2 or 3 kids that are going to be going to school at the same time? You're toast. You
are totally toast. And living in the Bay Area also, I mean, if you look at the cost of living here, it's expensive. I mean, you may make $150,000, but a lot of people are spending $150,000.
Spending $150,000 too. Let's talk a little bit about these sources of funding. The government has, what are they called? Pell Grants. Pell Grants,
right.
Okay. And what is a Pell Grant?
It's a grant set forth by the federal government, and generally it's for a lower income student that's going to get the Pell Grant. So it's available, but most of my clients don't qualify for the Pell Grant. But that doesn't mean they're not going to qualify for financial aid. And as an example, we were talking about the $24,000 figure for the expected family contribution. Well, if we were to lower that figure, say $10,000, okay, and now we apply for financial aid at, say, a $40,000 a year school, okay, that gives you, the difference there is a $30,000 what's called need.
Okay.
Need base. So what will happen is our computer software program for each school tells us which percentage of need each school will give. Some will give 100%. Some will give 80%. Some 92, 93. Just every school is different, and that's why we like to narrow this. And most of those schools we're talking about are private institutions. Private schools. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they now? Does it make any difference whether they're a California school and it's a California student, or a California kid that wants to go to a private school and he's going to go to Texas or Illinois or something? Do those things make any difference?
Well, it doesn't make a difference unless the school that you're going to apply to is an out-of-state public school.
Out-of-state public school.
Out-of-state public school means you're probably going to pay close to $30,000 for a school that costs about $18,000 because you're paying out-of-state tuition. Now, if it's a private institution out of state, it doesn't matter.
Got it. Because they have programs, and you said the endowments and the various scholarships and the grants that they would apply, and they're looking for the quality students from anywhere to come in.
I'll tell you, I talked to another college educator and planner on the East Coast recently, and because of our area where we live, the diversity, and there are a lot of good, well-rounded students in the Bay Area. Some colleges are giving up to $5,000 or $10,000 more per year just for a kid from Northern California.
Really?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Oh, very.
So that means there are possibilities and opportunities for you, but if you don't know that they exist, you can't take advantage of them.
That's correct.
Very, very cool. So let's, there was something that you had mentioned earlier, and I kind of wanted to go back to. We were talking about the competitiveness of being able to get into colleges right now. Now, I guess there's a lot of kids. Okay, that's one thing. But something that you were telling me earlier, Dan, was that there are an ever-increasing number of foreign students coming to the U.S. and applying to American colleges. Is that a fair statement?
We're still the greatest country in the world,
right.
The USA. And that is so true. And what that does is that limits the amount of spots available for the kids here in our country. And, you know, these kids are competitive too. Different colleges have their different criteria. But, you know, if you're going to apply at a private institution, I suggest there are different programs available out there, and I have one also that we have that will take you through the 12 steps of what you need to do to get into these private institutions. And this is a nationally known program, which I won't mention the name of it, but it actually starts you with your applications, and then it goes your brag sheet. Your
brag sheet?
Yeah, a brag sheet. A brag sheet are the things that you've done.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back to, you know, Boy Scouts, and I mean, you build up your list of what you've been doing. If you haven't been doing anything, not good. Really, that's when, you know, you say when should you really start planning. Well, if you can get your kid to start volunteering as young as possible, get that community activist or community feeling into him, and that counts on your brag sheet.
Wow.
Yeah, the brag sheet, the essays, I mean, your referral list, your
when you say essay in terms of when you're
private institutions are going to do a couple things. They're going to want you to write an essay, and they can tell if the parents helped them or not. They do. They have people trained at this. So that is one thing. And as an example, I have a student that's not a 4.0 or 5. You know, you can go up and weight at 5.0 now, but I had a student that is going to Stanford right now, and she's an average student, 3.5, okay? And she blew them away, and she got admitted to Stanford. And the reason for it, they loved her essay.
They loved her essay.
Loved her essay. So it's not just about, I'm sure there were tons of other kids that had higher grade point averages, but they could tell that, you know, she's surrounded herself and been out in the world a little bit, and she just blew them away.
That's cool.
Oh.
I'm going to want you to continue to talk about some of these things because I think that's important for the people to know. But I wanted to let you know we have less than 5 minutes left in the show. Okay. So let's talk. So we've talked about some of these things that you need to do, the brag sheet, the essays, etc. What else do they need to be thinking about?
Interview.
Interview?
They will interview you. They want the private colleges, they will interview you. So we prepare you for that also.
In other words, they want the student to go to the school and sit down there with somebody and do a face-to-face.
Face-to-face, or some will do it on the telephone. Some will do it on the telephone. So admissions is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, matter of fact, there are companies on the East Coast that charge anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 per family, and they guarantee that you'll get into your first or second choice Ivy League school.
Ooh.
But guess what? That same program they've made available to the public on a web-based program that is, you know, that I'm actually promoting. So it's fantastic. It's very inexpensive, but it helps. So most family and kids don't have a clue when it comes to the things that we're talking about.
Well, the whole idea of interviews, I mean, you talk about, I've been in the business community for many, many years, and it's amazing how many people that I've had to interview, and they have they can't communicate well. They can't put a full sentence together. They don't look you in the eye. They stutter like crazy.
Exactly.
And those are the sort of things that I'm guessing from what you're saying is that it was important for a student to be thinking about today. if he's planning on getting into a college
Mm-hmm.
4, 5, or more years from now.
That's correct.
Okay, what else? We got a few
Well,
minutes left.
one other thing, I mean, to save a little money to kind of help your kid into the career they're going to go into, have that kid figure out what the kid, if you can get the kid to figure out what he wants to do in life, that's one challenge. But if you have a kid that has an idea what they want to do, have them do their community service or go to companies that are in that field and volunteer for an internship or just volunteer to work at the company. Because what will happen a lot of times is that once you've worked at you come home in the summertime, you're going to work for that company. Well, guess what happens when you graduate? Of course, you're probably going to apply at that company that you have experience with, and they know you. You think your odds of getting a job at that company are better than someone that doesn't? Oh,
sure.
For sure. That's a great tip.
And I would think that if you are volunteering in that type of arena too, that you have the chance of using that experience and a reference letter from the owner of that company that says this kid.
You got it. You're getting it a little bit now.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Those are some of the things that we suggest that families do.
You know, and I got to believe that most people don't even think about that sort of thing.
Oh, no. No, college is a business. Remember that. Okay. Colleges, let me tell you how it works. Colleges are looking for the best student for the least amount of money that they have to give up.
Okay.
Okay. And the key is to unlocking. We know that a ton of colleges have funds. The key is unlocking those funds, and some of the things we just were talking about are some of the keys it is to getting some of that funds. Because I've seen families that make over $200,000 get some financial aid.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if your kid is there and everything, is done correctly, you have a good shot at getting some financial aid.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating. I think we're getting down to the point where we're just about out of time.
Okay.
And I want to remind the folks that if you've got, whether it's a son or a daughter or a niece or a nephew or a grandson or granddaughter or whatever, that is going to need to be thinking about this, start thinking about it now. I mean, don't wait until they're just about ready to graduate from high school. And if you have any questions about this or want to reach Dan, send me a query at info@referencepointtv.com. We'll answer your questions. We'll pass the data on to Dan, and he and his staff will be able to try to answer any questions for you. Dan, we're at the point where we have to wrap up. So if you had like a 15-second statement that you wanted to communicate to people that is something that you really want them to know about, what would it be?
It would be to start planning for that kid's education as early as possible. Don't wait. The worst thing that you could do is wait till he's a senior in high school and then try to go through the process. The worst thing you could, at least start when he's a sophomore.
At least start when he's a sophomore or sooner.
Or sooner.
Okay, well, Dan, thank you very much for being a guest here on Reference Point. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate your being out there as well, and I hope you found this to be as interesting and informative as I have. And thank you again for being out there. We'll see you next time on Reference Point.